Portal, alongside pretty much every other game released by Valve, has become a cult classic in the world of video games, and for good reason. It was released in the orange box alongside Half-Life 2 Episode 2 and Team Fortress 2, but Portal really stood out to people for both its dark humor and innovative mechanics. If you've never played it, here's the long and short of it. You play as a test subject in a mysteriously empty lab setting. You solve puzzles using a portal gun, and there's a computer woman named GLaDOS who guides you through the place. Now, Portal's a weird one for me, because most of the reasons I like it are for nostalgia, just because it was a game that I played and really enjoyed growing up. It's also weird for me to review because I can't help but compare it to its sequel, which improves upon literally every aspect of the game. Portal is like a child that hasn't quite figured itself out yet. The foundation is great, and there's a lot there on its own, but in terms of art direction and level design, I really don't think it's all quite there yet. But I'm not here to talk about all the things that Portal could have been and then became with Portal 2. I'm just here to talk about why I, even if it's not perfect, still really like Portal. First of all, I think that Portal does an excellent job at teaching the player. There's never any obvious tutorial on the mechanics, you just learn through experience and repetition, which is the best way to do it. You also get occasional tips from GLaDOS, which is a great in-universe way to help the player out. It's not at all jarring when she explains things about the portals, because we're in a testing environment where we're not expected to know everything from the get-go. In some games, it can seem hard or even frustrating to learn all of its mechanics, but in Portal, it's gradual enough where you're learning something new almost every single level, and it's fun and rewarding to add a new trick to your arsenal. Some levels may require you to fling yourself over a gap or to bounce energy pellets off of a cube. Even though you're just working with a couple of portals, the game really does a lot with them. Each mechanic is introduced in an environment where it's nearly impossible to fail, so when you encounter something more complex, it doesn't feel unfair. Take for instance the first level where you encounter turrets. At this point in the game, you've never seen them before, so you don't know how they work. But when you first enter the room, you encounter a turret facing away from you, harmless, and one that spots you through the glass. This one starts shooting at you, but it can't hurt you through the wall. You're then able to learn that toppling over the turrets, either with a portal or by throwing them, will disable them. So in the span of about 10 seconds, the player has learned that when you get into a turret's field of view, it will fire at you, and you can knock them over to shut them off. You've learned everything there is to know about turrets in the very first room you ever encounter them. It's classic Valve game design. That is to say, pretty damn good. And to top the whole game off, there's a really great escape sequence at the end of the game where you have to go behind the scenes of Aperture to make your way to GLaDOS, where you promptly duke it out. I really dig this whole part of the game because I love being able to explore different parts of the lab that you couldn't access before. In previous test chambers, you could see different observation windows and such, and now you can finally look inside and see what's going on. Also, the whole vibe with the big industrial fans and exposed pistons is just really cool. The boss fight is just alright. The cores are pretty funny, and the sense of urgency with the countdown timer is pretty cool, but other than that, it just served its purpose as an ending. I'm probably a little biased here, because as I stated before, it's hard not to compare this game with Portal 2, but I can't help but thinking that this boss fight feels a bit lackluster, and also just a bit easy. Overall, it's pretty decent, and the ending credits song you get is a nice way to wrap things up. There are also advanced and challenge levels that unlock after beating the game, but they're nothing more than just modified versions of the puzzles that you've already played, which to me was a bit of a disappointment, but there's definitely some enjoyment to be had there. Now, one of my biggest gripes with Portal is that it's just a little too short for my liking. In context, it does make sense. It was a game included in a bundle with 2 other games, and it was mostly made by some college students recently brought onto Valve. But I can't help but wish there was more, because what they have is just so good. Like I said earlier, the game does a really good job at teaching the player its mechanics, but in my opinion, it doesn't feel like it entirely pays off. The whole game felt like it was building to something incredible, and then it just kinda ends. You don't use as many mechanics as I would really like in the later parts of the game either. You definitely use flinging a lot, but the sections where there's turrets are not intense, as you can easily pick them off one by one, and the boss fight uses a mechanic that you learn in like the last 10 minutes of gameplay. I think for all the great design choices presented earlier, the choices made with the boss fight are pretty questionable. That aside, I think all the good outweighs the bad here, especially since the bad is really just the not as good. Valve definitely did a stellar job with this game, as many people think it's their favorite game from the Orange Box, and many claiming it to be their favorite puzzle game. Now, it's definitely not my favorite, but it has a lot going for it. So if you somehow haven't played it yet, I definitely say it's worth it. And if you're interested in game design, you can see some of the developers' insights and thought processes behind making the game in the developer commentary mode. I've always found it really cool that Valve does this with their games. For someone like me who loves analyzing why developers choose to do certain things a certain way, this mode is a real treat. Anyway, that's all I got, so see you in the next one.